Hey everyone, it's Alan over at Cobblers Plus, and thank you for joining us today. Today's video, we're going to be working on a pair of beautiful Chanel shoes. Nothing too much wrong with them, but we're going to be adding some rubber protective soles from the Casali Mirror line. So come check it out and see how we do these. So if you've seen some of our previous videos where we do a protective sole on, say, red bottom Christian Louboutins, like I have a pair over here that's going to be worked on. Sadly, I think this might be a potential fake pair, but we're not doing that one for you today. We're doing the Chanel, which these are definitely a real one and beautiful. I love the Chanel leather, whether it's their purses or their shoes. Very soft, very nice leather. I love it. But for these ones, we're not doing anything too major. We're just doing protective soles. I'll grab my last over here. And for those of you who don't know what a protective sole is, it's just a thin rubber averaging about 1.2 to maybe 2.5 millimeters thick, roughly. And the rubber comes in different colors, different variants. Some of them have smooth finishes like this mirror one here. Some of them have a little bit of traction, and some are just kind of, you know, really grippy. So there's a number of those out there. We actually did a Sole Talk Sunday episode talking more about them, so if you want to check that out, you can definitely do that. It's under the Sole Talk Sunday category, and you can see the protective sole comparison. But adding a protective sole is a huge deal when it comes to shoes such as this. They're nice, high-end, luxurious pair, but there's a downside to them because they have the leather soles on it. They're so nice and everything that if you end up falling in love with these shoes and you just wear them a little too much, you may end up wearing a hole in the sole, and then when it comes to having to re-sole them, it's just one of those things where you feel like it might not be original. I know some of you who are avid enthusiasts of these higher end brands like this, you want as many original parts left over on these shoes as much as possible, because that really indicates that this is that particular brand, such as these Chanels. So in that case, that's why we had the Vibram protective soles, the Casali protective soles, GTO. There are a number of them out there, and that's to really help save them, because it's a lot easier to end up having to replace these rubber protective soles than having to replace the leather, and it keeps that original leather on there intact for as long as possible. The other thing, it also adds a little extra durability and some grip and traction. Now obviously this one doesn't have a tread pattern on it, but on a smooth surface like this table here, this thing grips very well. My fingers are actually just sliding on the back of it because it's got a special coating on the back. But on the top part, the part that's going to be on the ground, that area has really good grip. So we start out with grabbing some of our painter's tape here and try to get it lined up as much as possible. And we like to use the painter's tape obviously because it's a lot safer to use on soft leathers like this. And the reason why we do that, you'll see in just a second. Let me grab a pen here. Shoot, I need to grab a different pen because this is a black ink pen. I need to find a silver pen, so give me just a second. Somebody stole mine. Sorry, I had to grab my silver pen. Obviously we're going to be using this to mark, and this is one of the reasons why we have the tape. Is one, it really helps protect that area here that we're going to be not working on, in other words, and it's a great way of indicating. With using a pen, we're going to mark where we want this protective sole to hit. I just got to figure out where the logo is underneath this tape a little better by pressing it some more. There we go. And the reason why I switched over to my silver pen is the black ink from a regular pen, it still transfers over to the protective sole a little bit, and you got that little faint black line, and it's a little frustrating to remove, and I really don't want to have to sand that out because it takes off some of that nice beautiful mirror finish. So for any of you cobblers watching, silver pen works great on these. If you got a red bottom you're working on, red pen. Might not be as visible, at first, but if you're using painter's tape or other versions of tape like that, you're going to see that red very well. But the silver pen works out great for me. Now at this point, this is the scary part that a number of cobblers are terrified of. A number of you out there who, again, are avid enthusiasts of this, you see this knife and you're terrified of it. Don't worry, I've got steady enough hands. There are a few cobblers out there that do phenomenal work and they don't have steady hands. You know who I'm talking about if you're an avid watcher of videos when it comes to shoe recrafting and rebuilding. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Steve. You've got those shaky hands, but I think they are kind of a benefit to you. So, like a ninja. So we're just going to cut along this line right here, right where the marking was. Beautiful. Just cut off a little bit of this tape carefully there and peel it off. Voila. So that just cuts it right there. So now we're going to start cutting off the leather a little bit, and I'll explain that in just a second. Okay, so now at this point we're gonna have to cut it out at an angle here slightly. To cut it out, we need to be able to have this end of the protective sole sitting as flush as possible. Now again, this is one of those parts that's also terrifying for some, but there are other alternatives to being able to do it. We can go straight to the sander and sand it out. The problem with actually using a sander, no matter how good of a cobbler you are, every single machine can't get a perfect 90-degree angle cut, in other words, or sand on that on the machines, because they have a slightly rounded corner on all of them. And so that's one of those things that obviously for you cobblers you may understand it, but those of you who don't understand it, we have to sand out the surface to be able to have a better adhesion. I mean, especially you take this one for example, it's got that tape gunk on there, or whatever, the sticker tag that was on there for the pricing. It's got this one on here as well. That's going to get in the way if we just slap some glue on there and everything. The other thing is also that you're going to have a little bit of a notch left over, because it's quite literally having to place this over top. And that little corner right here that sticks up, it's not much, it's just a little bit, but it's enough that after a period of time wearing it, that corner is going to start getting caught on things and start peeling up, and then you're going to lose your sole. When you get it perfectly flushed where you don't need to end up worrying about that, you're not going to have any kind of issues whatsoever. So that's why we have to make sure that we sand it, we cut it, and give a little bit of room. But anyways, that's why we have to make sure to cut and sand so that everything sits nice and flush. It also takes away that disbalance. A lot of people do ask me, well, if I had that protective sole over top of the leather sole, does it make me feel like I'm leaning back? Technically, even if we just put it over top, you wouldn't really feel it, because again, at 1.2 millimeters, that's not much. There's only a handful of people in the world that can feel that kind of difference, and typically they don't wear shoes like this. They tend to have certain issues with feet, like certain disabilities possibly too, or damages to the nerve endings as well. So that's usually the only times that you feel that kind of difference. But regardless, even in that case too, we'd still be taking it out and make sure that it's all nicely leveled and balanced. So now at this point we're just going to carefully slice it. Beautiful. Just slicing out a little strip like that there. Now obviously I still have to make sure it's all leveled out all around. There's some areas that might need a little extra cut off here and there. Let's see how it goes here. it is a little bit harder because these don't have a finish on the bottom. If you take the red bottoms, or if you get another color bottom stain on there, typically once you cut it out there's more indication because it shows the leather. Well, these are nude all across, so even as we cut in, you can't really tell that there's really a cut, or you can't really tell too much of the depth. So I'm going to do one last final check. If I have my nylon brush here, it'd be, there it is. Just a nylon brush to kind of clean out any dust that may be in the way there. Check to make sure how everything is sitting. Beautiful. There we go. Now you won't be able to tell even on camera, but for me, I can see it at this angle perfectly that everything's sitting nice and flush. So at this point, now I'm going to take some more of the tape and just tape it all around the edges over here to really protect the upper. Obviously we're going to be redoing the edges because during the sanding process, trimming and everything, we're going to have to nick that edge a little bit, and that's usually normal. We're going to be reapplying a new coating, and so before we do any additional steps and before we end up taking this to the sander, I'm going to go ahead and tape all that out. I'm going to do the same thing to the other shoe here, and then I'm going to run this over to the sander, and you'll see that as we're sanding things out to get it all sanded up, and we'll see you back in just a little bit. All right, so now as you saw, we sanded everything, and we've got everything taped up on the uppers. Now the sanding part of it, obviously there's no real measurement to it. With Cobblers, we kind of fine tune it where it's almost eyeballing it on this type of build anyways. You can't really measure it out because what happens is the companies, they actually leave the top, well, the center of the sole a little bit thicker and then thinner around the edges, so they kind of bevel it. So it's all about feel. You kind of get a feel for it. A lot of us cobblers, we start building up sixth senses for certain things. We actually have 7th, 8th, 10th, and so on. So we kind of get used to these things. But anyways, at this point now, we're going to grab a little bit of a sandpaper piece like this, and right where we cut the material out, we don't want to sand that area on the machines because we may end up screwing up the little edge that we just created by cutting into it. So we end up doing it by hand and just lightly sand it just enough to rough things up so that the adhesive has a better surface to bind to instead of a smooth leather surface. Oof, a lot of dust there. But anyways, that's what it looks like right there. And at that point, we're ready to start putting some glue on there. Now when we glue it, for any of you cobblers out there that are watching, I know there's a few of you, when we glue these, I always like to obviously put glue on here, and then I always put just a little bit of glue right there on that very edge so that when those two corner pieces of the 90-degree angles meet, there's a better adhesion to it as well. Now with these Casali finished soles, some of you who are familiar with working on protective soles, some of you who know what protective soles are, typically, thought I had someone flying around, but typically we like to sand these up and rough them up so that there's another area where we can have better bonding to the adhesive. But the problem is that you don't want to do it on these. None of the Casali line, almost none of their line basically, you want to do that with, because the type of rubber that it is, they actually prime it beforehand at the factories, and so you're going to end up sanding off the primer, and you're unfortunately going to have issues with it peeling up. So it's kind of a side note for any of the cobblers watching, and for any of you who are familiar with the the whole method. Maybe you've seen me sanding a protective sole, sand the edge or something. We can't do it on these, but regardless, we're going to go ahead and do the other one. I'll start putting on some glue, and we'll see you back in just a little bit when it's time to stick it all together. Alright everyone, so we're back here again. Time to stick these soles together. We've got double coat on the leather because the first coat is kind of like a primer. It's soaked into the leather, and the second coat is really what pulls it all together. Good note for a lot of the cobblers out there, or those who are just starting out. Now, typically I like to stick a lot of my soles into the oven, heat them up, get everything activated, but with the Casali sole in particular, and because it's got a primer on it, not a good idea to do. One, because again, it's got a primer on it, and so there's really no need to actually activate it. That primer, I've noticed, that actually has a reaction with the contact cements that we use. Side note for anyone that wants to know, we use Jet Set majority of the time. If you're using Barge, Masters, CDC, whichever one of those, they work phenomenally as well, but they all still have that same kind of reaction with the primers in particular. So you don't need to stick it in the oven. The other reason is the Casali compound that they use in here, it's got a little bit more of like a nylon type material, and what happens is if you leave it in there just a little bit too long on accident, you'll get, let me grab this, that. Yeah, this was a red bottom sole that was just plain like that. I was doing full soles. I only had one pair left, and I'm trying to get them taken care of. I got distracted just long enough to, to forget about that they were in the oven for just a little too long. It wasn't like 5 or 8 minutes. It was literally about 60 to maybe at most 90 seconds. And when I went to grab it, the whole thing just pulled out of the oven. I'm like, oh, that's crazy. But yeah, that's what happens if you accidentally get distracted with certain things. And some distractions are fairly common in the shop, obviously, but that was after hours. I was working on those shoes, so I had no distractions up front. I can't remember what it was that distracted me. It might have been the family was over or something. But anyways, so at this point we're going to start lining these up nicely. Now before I really lay this flat, I like to grab the back end of my hammer. This is what's called a French hammer, the little tail fin of it, and just kind of press it out up against that 90-degree angle drop as much as I can. There we go. Beautiful. Now we'll just lay it out. Now I'm doing a lot of extra hammering just because I'm not putting these on the press. Usually finer shoes like this, I don't like sticking on the press too much. It causes a little bit too much problems. Even though our press can be regulated, I still don't want to risk it. And the other thing is also this Casali is so perfectly mirrored that certain little imperfections in the padding on our press will appear on this Casali sole. So I try avoiding it personally. I know some of the cobblers out there, they will still do it, which is fine. Maybe your pads on your press are a little bit better than mine. Mine need to be changed out, but even if they're changed out, I still wouldn't end up risking it personally. But every cobbler does their own thing. Beautiful. Okay, so now at this point, these are done at this stage. Make sure to check around and see how everything is. No empty spots, no spots where it didn't adhere. Looking good. Alright, now at this point I'm just gonna hang them up and let them cure overnight, because I'd rather allow a good overnight curing before I continue on. And when it's time to continue on, I'll be back over here. So for me, it'll be tomorrow that I'll see you, but for you, it'll be a couple of seconds. So we'll see you back here in just a few. All right, so we've let these cure overnight, and now at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and use my hook knife like that. Yes, it looks a little terrifying, but I'm fairly used to this one. I got a fresh new blade. So now we're gonna cut off all this excess. Hear that squeaking? Just comes to show how grippy this material is actually. It's one of the reasons why it's actually a little hard to work with, because all the different trimmers and everything that you use, even the blades too, if they're worn out heavily or anything like that, it actually just melts this material, all that friction when you're sanding or trimming. It melts it and it just looks horrible. So good side note for a lot of cobblers out there watching. The other thing is that even with cutting, if you've got a dull blade, it just stretches and kind of comes undone and everything. So there we go, got a nice rough trim. Now there's some of those DIYers, people that kind of do it on the side as a side gig, or they do it themselves. Usually that's what they do, and they leave it like that, you know. I mean, it's a fairly close cut. There's still a few little spots that can be touched up, obviously, but we're going to take it up an extra notch, obviously, and trim it, sand it, and make it look proper. But obviously throughout the whole process, we're going to leave the tape on, because again, we still have to do the edging because it's got a brown edge on there. Now obviously, because this is a beige color here, depending on how it's going to turn out and stuff, we're probably going to leave that protective sole actually beige on the edges, while the leather portion of it, we're gonna try to keep that nice beautiful brown there. So let me go ahead and switch over to the machine and go ahead and get started on that part of it. So we'll see you over there. So at this point, gotta touch up the edges here. I'm gonna grab my Q-tip. I've got some of this varnishing ink. Just gonna apply it nicely all over the edge. And this is one of the reasons why we keep the tape on, because obviously this is ink, and if this gets on the upper of these, it is not coming off. So you have to definitely take caution. All right. Now you saw me trimming and sanding up. Sorry, got interrupted there, but anyways. As far as on the machine, what I was doing, the first thing was trimming it, because this particular material has a tendency to melt. It doesn't really, you know, sand or grind easily. It likes to melt most of all. So we have to run it through our trimmer first, which are basically little blades that spin really fast. And then afterwards, we touch it up a little bit with the sander. So, grab a rag back here. Alright, now that I've got that on there, gotta wipe off some of the excess here. And just give it a couple of minutes to dry while I do the other one. And we'll get ready to start brushing them. We'll see you back in just a few. Alright, so at this point, now we're over at our machine. Now, if you watched some of my previous videos, a number of times we'll use this varnishing wheel here to melt the wax into this. But because this is such a fine leather on here, we definitely don't want to use the varnish wheel because that's designed to really provide a lot of friction. So we're going to just apply a coat of the Yankee wax here, which is a harder wax, to our nylon brush and just put a thin coat around the edges and then buff it up on the horsehair brush. There we go. Now it's time to go ahead and clean this up just a little bit more around the edges, clean up the bottom, and get ready to start taking off the tape. And plus I need to do the other one anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and meet you back at the table when we start working on the rest of it. Alright, so we're back over at the workbench, and now at this point we're just going to take a little bit of acetone and just start gently cleaning up the areas here. And just to give everyone an idea what I mean by when this melts here, I actually have one little spot that ended up melting, and it leaves these nasty little pieces. I don't know if the camera's gonna catch it. There's just like this weird little corner, in other words, and obviously we're gonna fix that up. And let me just go through here with a little bit of the acetone and clean things up, make it look a little bit more presentable. I can... Okay. Now I can put an acrylic finish on the edge and make it a brown color, but that stuff tends to wear out and it just looks not so great afterwards, so I'd much rather kind of keep it neutral. But when I take off the tape, this one's very hard for me to decide. I think I may have to go with the acrylic paint, but before I do that, let's see if I can reach in here real quick, grab a little bit of scissors and just kind of clip up that little corner there that's sticking up. But now that I see what it's looking like and I can envision it a little bit better, I think I'm gonna go ahead and go grab that acrylic paint. I'm just using Angelus, so let me go grab it. Alright, so it's just one of these. This is the dark brown here. And a lot of times everyone's using the brushes to apply it. I like to use my fingers just because I'm able to have just a little bit more control over it. I can wipe off whatever extra is remaining. And I'll show you guys in just a second, a little bit closer up. So, come on. Better grab a towel also because I need to wipe off some of the excess mounts off of there. Okay, so that's what it looks like right there. After it's nice and dry, then I'll touch it up with what's called a little bit of a spray shine as a sealant. See, but I know some of you cobblers that might be watching saying, ew, spray shine. Yes, I know, spray shine. I only strictly use it as just a clear coat. It just seals things up very nicely on these acrylic paints. And it makes it a little bit more durable. For those of you who don't know, spray shine is a spray that basically designed what the name implies. It's a shine. It literally just applies a heavy coat of carnauba wax and makes it really shiny very quickly. But if you got a nice pair of shoes, it's terrible. You don't do that on a nice pair of shoes, unless like in this case where we're having to use an acrylic paint and make it look beautiful. So that's why we'll use the spray shine. If any of you are wondering about, well, why don't you just use the wax? Well, wax needs something to bind to a little bit better, and it binds very well to leather, but to the rubber soles and rubber material, it doesn't quite do what it needs to. It doesn't bind as well and as easily. I mean, even if it was easy, or if we didn't care if it was easy or not, it's not going to stay on there very long. It's going to wear off fairly quick, so I'd rather have something last as long as possible. So some of you may have seen me do this with other shoe brands as well. I use a roller sometimes I'll use just my fingers, but in this case fingers look like they'll be working a lot better. So I'm going to set this one aside to dry for a minute, go through and clean it up again with some more acetone, just in case if there's any small little spots that I want nicer looking. But that kind of gives you an idea there. Once it's all dry though, I'll be able to go through with that spray shine just a little bit, just to give it that nice beautiful coat. Alright, so let me take care of the rest of that and I'll see you back in just a little bit. Alright everyone, so I let it dry. I've got a little bit of that spray shine around the edges there. A little piece of dust there. So let's go ahead and start removing the tape. Now obviously sometimes the tape will rip and get stuck, so we got to get in there with a little sharp tool carefully, and just a matter of being a little bit careful. But this still is always the safest way to do it, because as you can tell, that tape's got a little bit of wax from the buffing wheel, and in order for us to be able to buff it and everything, we have to, you know, get close. You saw how wide those brushes are. Even if it was only as wide as this sole or even thinner, that thing wouldn't be able to spin fast enough to really buff that edge there. So tape is a must. There are some cobblers that refuse to use the tape, and then there are some that won't even take in work like this just because they're concerned about causing any potential damage to their shoe like this. But okay. Come on, I think there's a little piece that wants to stay. Ha, got it. There we go. It's stuck on me. Sorry, gotta be careful pulling this off. Okay. Alright, and then one last thing. There's always just a little smidge of glue right there. And sometimes, looks like I can actually get that out with my fingers there. Okay, cool. But, there we go. Now when you have a darker sole, typically it's a lot easier to be able to hide that faint little line there. No matter how precise we get it and everything, there's always going to be a faint little line there. That's normal, that's part of it. Doesn't matter what brand of shoe they are. See, on like a red bottom, for example, we at least have certain things like this Angelus Walk on red that we can touch that up with, and it really hides it a lot better. It's humanly impossible. Even machines can't possibly get it down to be that perfect, where there's not going to be some form of tiny faint line basically left. So, you know, but from the side view and everything, nobody's ever going to see that. And that transition there is so smooth that it's not going to come undone. And what happens with some protective sole versions, where some people do it certain ways, they actually do like a drop down transition where they literally just glue it over top. If the cobbler wants to do that, that's their decision, but I'm not a big fan of doing it that way. That's just kind of improper seeming, so definitely prefer to do it this way here. Alright, but anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it's not my usual whole recrafting or anything like that. It's just protective soles, but I wanted everyone to take a look and see how we work on a pair of Chanel's. It's very similar to the same way that we work on Louis Vuittons and a number of other high-end footwear that's very very fine leathers like this one, just because it's going to absorb everything and anything. You accidentally spill something on there, you accidentally nick it somewhere, it's going to really show everything off. So thought I would show the process that it actually takes. It takes quite a bit, and not every cobbler wants to go through and cut with a knife or a blade like I did in this video here. Some of them again just sand it. My father, a number of other people, a gentleman that works here, same thing. They don't want to touch shoes like this. I'm fine with that. I'll do it myself then. But anyways, that's how we put on a Mirror Casali protective sole on a pair of beautiful little ballerina style Chanel shoes. So hope you enjoyed the video. Questions or comments, feel free to comment down below. Go to our website, CobblersPlusCO. All of our information and details are on our website. If you want to send us an email for questions, give us a call, stop by locally if you're here in Denver, or you know, if you have any work you'd like us to do on it, you can always ship it in using our website with that PDF form on there. Otherwise, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell icon to be notified when we have videos out. We do a lot of daily posts talking about different things in our industry, shoe polishes, brands, and a number of other things as well, accessories for shoes, and covering topics about the brands themselves as well. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.